Hello and welcome to the Gallant Few podcast. My name is Mason Stewart and I'll be your host for another Premier League show. As always, a lot to get through. And with me tonight, starting with Colin McDuff. How are you, Colin?
I'm very good, Mason. Thanks for having me on. I'm really enjoying coming on and getting to talk something not Rangers. As much as I love talking Rangers, man, it's nice not having a horse in the race and not just being absolutely deflated or ecstatic every time you start a podcast. It's nice going into these neutrals, so I went forward to it.
No, absolutely. And we've picked a brilliant time. It's just half time in the Man City Arsenal game. It's currently 1-1, so great time in there. But, that's what it's all about. And next up, we've got Jamie. How are you, Jamie?
I'm a lot better than I have been recent weeks. Obviously, we got away with 3 points for a change, so I've actually come into the podcast with a smile on my face, even though we don't have our cameras on. But yeah, I'm definitely in a better position in terms of my headspace compared to the last few weeks. But I appreciate obviously getting the opportunity to come back on and talk football with you guys again. So thank you.
Well, yeah, I didn't want to mention it, but obviously, first time since we've done the pod, first win of 2023, we'll get onto. But I'm in no place to sort of Liverpool after what happened not too long ago. So swiftly moving on. Colin, let's start with Nathan Jones then, another Premier League sacking. I feel like every 2 weeks or every week at the minute there's a sacking, but I think we called sort of this one coming pretty quickly. He only lasted for 14 games, which is mad really because the amount of football since the World Cup. He's gone in there, not won a Premier League game at home. I think their only win come at Goodison Park against Everton, and they were beat Saturday by 10 men Wolves. I think Wolves played the game with an hour with 10 men, and he come out with an absolutely corker again at full time and said that he didn't want the opposition to go down to 10 men. So before we come on to the whole, what happened after that, what was your thoughts on Nathan Jones and obviously his run as manager at Southampton?
I'm going to do a bit of a 180 from last week and say that I think I'm going to miss him. But obviously last week we were just ridiculing him and just saying he's a bit of a roaster, and he is. I stand by that, but he's kind of like the pantomime villain, isn't he? It's like the panto season's ended and you're not going to see Elaine C. Smith until next year. That's one for. I just realised I'm talking to two Englishmen. That's one for the Scottish listeners, but. Because the more I was looking into him, the more press conferences he had, I was like, this guy is just peak Partridge. Like there was one at the tail end of last week before he got sacked. He was talking about how he's ultra fit because he could have been a PE teacher or something. But taking the nonsense interviews out of the equation, the writing's been on the wall. He's the results haven't been good enough. That same rock bottom of the Premier League, and you can see the lack of belief in the side. Even when Wolves go down to 10 men, they get a goal back. They lack a belief and they just look a bit nervous and anxious. And whether it's the manager's fault, the players' fault, or a mixture of everything, if the manager can't get a tune at the players, then the manager has to be the one that goes. So I think this has been a long time coming. They've done it with enough time that if they get the right appointment in, they can maybe try and make a push. Although I don't see it.
You say you're gonna miss him. I'm definitely gonna miss him. But who would have missed one of the best coaches in Europe? That was what he called himself. Absolute nutcase. Jamie, what's your thoughts on this? Because I was listening to TalkSport on Saturday in the car, and they were saying that the reporter there said that was the best that he's seen Southampton in that first half under Nathan Jones. But obviously, what happened in the second half, I think that even if he would have sort of survived it another week, but football's a funny old game. It's mad that they were saying that that's the best performance they've had under him at half time, but then to lose 2-1 to 10 men, and Wolves obviously not having a great season themselves, big win for them. Especially being down to 10.
Yeah, I kind of like going back on what Colin said, I think the writing's been on the wall for the last few weeks. Like Colin, didn't know too much about Nathan Jones pre him coming into Southampton. Why would I? I mean, he was a Luton manager, went on to be Stoke for a few months, and then ended up back in Luton. All of a sudden, he gets a job in the Premier League. So you kind of take it with a pinch of salt and think, well, maybe he's another kind of Graham Potter, like he's coming through the ranks a little bit. His team, I mean, let's face it, Southampton, I know, will beat us at the best of times. They've always had trouble scoring goals. They've got people like Shea Adams up top for them. I think his highest season is probably something like 8 goals in a season. So it's not like they've been pulling up trees. So it was always going to be a tough job. But why you go make that job a lot harder for yourself by actually? I mean, I get when managers go into press conferences, they try and deflect, they try and take the pressure off the players and kind of make it all about them. But be a bit defiant. Don't turn it into them people actually laughing at you. It makes no sense at all. I think his statements are probably the biggest catalyst in him going, because it shows a complete disconnect. It's not the fact that they were losing games. It was only a couple of weeks ago that they put Man City out of the cup, and everybody was going, well, this is the kick on that they were needed. So there is performances in there. But then to make these kind of comments, it just completely disillusions the fans. I mean, as an owner sitting there, they must have been thinking, I don't even know what this means, or what it means for the players going into they don't know where they stand. The constant changing. A lot of the players they would have brought this season will not be Nathan Jones signings. Let's put that, just in a bit of perspective. But they've got such a young team. I think their oldest player is James Ward-Prowse at 28 years old. Unless Bednarik plays, who I think is just maybe 29. The average age of the team's like 23 years old for a Premier League team. I mean, that's pretty much unheard of. I mean, Arsenal have always pushed that age category, but not when you're sitting at the bottom of the pyramid, if you like, of the Premier League. So it was always a difficult job. I just think he just shown how out of depth he was because he wasn't able to handle the media. He wasn't able to handle those kind of conversations. If it was a player that had said these kind of things, you would expect the manager to huckle the player in and kind of give him, you need to go to media class. I'd be surprised if Nathan Jones has had any media classes. That's some of the statements he said. Talking about Welsh women, fittest PE teacher, best coach in Europe, down in the lowly, Luton. It just makes no sense. Unfortunately, he will be remembered for his comments more than his games in charge of Southampton. So, inevitable. He was gone.
Definitely. I think it was a mad appointment in the first place, to be honest. It was. I think they've sealed their. I think personally, they've sealed their fate with that appointment. Whoever comes in there now. But time will tell. Colin, Jesse Marsh, another potential mad appointment that looks like it's not going to be happening. He was sacked by Leeds. We spoke about that last week. He was meant to be taking the Southampton job, but today news broke that talks have broke down. Do you think that's? I don't think it's unheard of that sort of a manager gets sacked in and around that relegation zone, and then he goes to a rival. Dean Smith, actually, I think he did do it, didn't he? But when he left Villa, they weren't really I wouldn't really say there was a relegation with the squad they had. But what was your thoughts on Jesse Marsh, and who do you see? I know Gerrard's been linked with it. Who did you see sort of going in there realistically for Southampton?
I don't know. Going for Jesse Marsh, it doesn't seem to me that they're going to try and just stay up by hook or by crook. I think that's potentially going down the route of, okay, let's maybe try and build for a season in the Championship, try and build either way. I do like Jesse Marsh, but I think he'd be mad to take Southampton. I think he's a better coach than that. I do. In the current Southampton squad. Who do I see going in? I don't think Gerrard will get a punt. I think he'll have to go back to the Championship next before he gets a Premier League job. Just because, rightly or wrongly, his only real successes came for Rangers, and it's a bit of snobbery looking for England and up to Scotland. Frank Lampard is one of the favourites. I think he's maybe dropped into 5-2. I do like Lampard, and I think, again, I don't see Southampton saving the season. I don't see any Sean Dyche type saviour coming in. And if the likes of Dyche was to obtain the Southampton job instead of the Everton job, it's a different ball game in terms of the job in your hands. So I think we do need to look at next season. I think Frank Lampard's got a good track record of getting the best out of young players. Jamie mentioned there, it is a relatively young squad, so that may actually work in their favour. Another season where the same nucleus playing in the Championship top end, a young kind of progressive coach coming in, then they can back up to the Premier League 2 year older, 2 year wiser. So I'd like to see Lampard go in there.
Well, I think Burnley have done that with Vincent Kompany. I think that, it looks like they're going to bounce straight back. I think they're having a really good run at the minute. They've gone with a young, progressive coach, but I don't know who's making the decisions at Southampton. I just think going with Nathan Jones when someone like Dyche was available at the time, I think was crazy. Jamie, just on that, just last point on Southampton, who do you think would be a good fit for them right now?
I think the challenge that they've got is the same challenge that Leeds have got, is that the traditional firefighters are no longer available. Your traditional Sam Allardyces, your David Moyes, your Steve Bruce's, your Neil Warnock's, these kind of guys that come in, galvanise for 6 months, and then leave it to somebody else. These kind of people aren't on the market any longer because they've either retired or they've moved on, or for example, David Moyes is already in a job, Sean Dyche is already in a job. It screams an issue that they've made these choices of sacking people when they don't have somebody lined up. I did hear that Southampton were actually going a bit more afield and they were trying to get a manager that's over in Argentina, but he's worried at coming over in his first job being a relegation battle. So straight again, it shows where the direction of that club is going. I think anybody would be stupid to touch it right now, if I'm honest. I would hate for somebody like Gerard Lampard to go in there. I would think Gerard Lampard, if they were to go in there when they're in the Championship. See if they're in the Championship next season, then give them one of them to the punt, then give them the opportunity to bring it up because it will be their team. I think if they go in now and they get relegated with this team, they'll be left with that as their legacy. Unfortunately, that will be one of their stains, and I think that's the problem that they have right now, is that there's not a big enough managers that want to take it and take that gamble. So you are going to look at a Championship type of manager, but you're probably going to get that at the end of the season, maybe. So I don't see a quick fix for them, unfortunately.
See on that, I know the money of the Premier League is fucking astronomical.
Yeah.
And this is very much boyhood fan romanticising the notion. But if a manager like Gerrard or Lampard could say, I'll take it, but I need a guarantee that I'll be there in the summer regardless what happens, there's a free hit. That actually sells it to the manager, that free hit of come in, you get anything, it's a bonus. And having that pressure off the team and the manager might actually work out more in their favour.
Well, I think that's the problem with why Jesse Marsch is no longer in the running, is because they were only offering that 6 month deal. They weren't given any guarantees. So Jesse Marsch went, this is not the option for me then. So yeah, I think the fact that they are only looking to give a 6 month contract means that they're not going to get many people queuing at the door.
I think they need to be realistic with where they are, though. I think if they're going to attract anyone that's big names wise, I'd say they're not.
The problem is the drop of money, and the sheer volume of difference in money coming in a Premier League season compared to a Championship season. Southampton have made a lot of signs this season, so they would have done that on the basis that they were still in the Premier League. So it is going to be a massive gamble. Can they afford it? Who knows?
It definitely will be one to watch in the next couple of weeks. But moving it on, and tonight's going to be a lot of time spent talking about VAR. I think we have to, because this weekend I don't think I've seen so many poor decisions. Colin, I'll start with Arsenal. They dropped points to Brentford on Saturday, which, to be honest, I think we spoke about previous, Brentford are a very good side, but you expect Arsenal the way that they've been going this season to go and get 3 points. They went 1-0 up with half hour to go. And then Brentford equalised. This was mad. At the time when I see the goal, I thought it looked offside. But VAR, who was in charge of VAR, Lee Mason, he didn't draw the lines. So he forgot to draw the lines, and the goal stood. I mean, fair play for him to admitting that he forgot, by the way. But What's your thoughts on that? He must be a secret Spurs fan or something. Like, what's going on? Like, that's absolutely mental. We moan about Scottish refs and VAR, by the way. That is nuts.
This infuriated me because I took Arsenal in the last man standing and they were 1-0 up, and I thought, I'm through with early kick-off. Bang, Lee Mason must have took somebody else in that in the same last man standing, and he wanted that a few people go with Arsenal. Absolutely furious, but right. So I didn't watch the game, right? But with VAR, I get that the VAR technician is there to draw the lines. Surely somebody else is looking at it with their naked eye. Even without the lines, I could see, you two could see, the listeners could see it was offside. You don't need somebody to tell you it's offside to see. I think that looks offside. Absolute nonsense, and it just shows you. Like I say it on our on the in the weekly pods all the time. Like VAR is great, the technology works, but it's it's the humans behind it who are still going to make the mistakes. It was absolute nonsense, and Arteta was rightly furious about it, and obviously the way the game might go tonight, that might be two results in the space of a week that go a long way to defining their season.
No, definitely, and obviously the result last week, getting beat at Goodison, it was a big game for Arsenal. I think Saturday. Obviously tonight's absolutely huge, but I do feel for Arteta a little bit. I don't like the way he handled himself at times. I think he's got every right to absolutely lose his shit over this one. Jamie, what was your thoughts on it? Don't get me wrong though. Talking about the game, not just VAR. Brentford had a few chances and they could have quite easily won this one.
They probably deserved the equaliser, if we're being honest.
Yeah. And I think, the one thing that I'm very keen to try and clear this up. VAR is not an issue. It's the people controlling it. Every decision we're about to talk about, like, it's labelled VAR's the issue. Not one of those issues with VAR. They were all about the people controlling it. So I think there's two massive differences. I think the biggest argument, and I think it's the one thing that everybody wants to see, if you go back to the World Cup had semi-offside automated responses, and it reported a 0 error report at the end of the tournament. So it got every result spot on. I think reality is, but the amount of money that's in the Premier League right now, that's going to be what's coming in next. And it's probably the right thing to do. But yeah, pre that, as Colin says, you've got one job. What the fuck are you doing? With the greatest respect. Like, I mean, we all thought, remember when VAR kicked off and we thought they must have been there with like rulers along the screen or something like that. Like, he just forgot everything. How you forget that when that's your primary job, I can't really explain that. But I think going back to the game, I did watch the first half, and Brentford could have been 3-0 up in the first half. They hit the ball. They had a couple of point blank shots. They were very worth the draw, in my opinion. I would like to side with Arteta in his moaning rants. However, I can point to the fact that how many times Liverpool have been rubbed in the last 3 seasons on a Man City and ball at Everton that won the league for them, or these last ditch penalties that go against teams. I'm not a believer in they all work out throughout the turn of the season. That analogy people put together, but he was lucky to get a draw at the best of times. So it wasn't. I think he's just feeling the pressure because he lost last week, and obviously he's dropped points again. He's got a massive game that's on the night. He's trying to deflect to take it off his own team because obviously the first thing somebody says to him is, "This a slip?" I mean, come on, fuck! He's literally lost one game, and he's got a draw. It's not a slip. It's just inevitable that they're just going to have a point where they're not scoring as frequently as they were. At the beginning of the season, some of the goals he was scoring was just brilliant. It was brilliant link-up play. He's played, people like Martinelli and Saka, they play 100 miles an hour. They're ultimately going to slow down at some point. You can see that in other players like Son, for example, at Tottenham is another example. Traditional 100-mile-an-hour player. It's going to catch up with him at some point. I just think Arteta's just trying to manage that by deflecting it. So I don't buy that, he's not going to sleep for the rest of the season over the fact that he didn't get these 2 points. But in reality, he was probably lucky to get away with a point anyway. But I do believe that, as I said, VAR's not the issue. It's the people controlling VAR, and I'm a big advocate for the semi-automated offside that was brought in at the World Cup, because I thought that was really good.
Absolutely. We'll give a rest for just a couple of minutes. We will talk about Man City. I thought, Colin, that first 45 minutes on Sunday was the best I've seen them, definitely since the World Cup for me. I thought they got back to their best. Haaland didn't get on the score sheet, but he got an assist. They just looked so dangerous every time they went forward. And by the way, since Emery's gone in at Villa, their away form's been really good. But I thought Man City were just far too good in that first half. Caveat that second half, I thought they dropped off quite a bit. But I just want to mention Rodri. In my opinion, I'd say he's the best holding midfielder in the world, not only just the Premier League. What's your thoughts on City on Sunday? And is that a mad statement? Because I certainly have a lot of debates with my close friends on that one.
No, look, City were unplayable. That first 45 minutes on Sunday, they would have came up against 99% of football teams in the world, and they're probably going to get the same outcome. And that is Man City on their day. Man City under Pep. The big issue this season's been how consistently they can provide that, and it's no too much a criticism because they've done it consistently for years. But they were absolutely excellent on Rodri as well. Watching back in the game, he is shit hot. He really is. He's what I do really like about him, and it's probably what you're seeing more and more in the modern game with that whole, what we call him, the kind of defensive midfielder, holding midfielder. He steps out at the right time as well. How often do we see a holding midfielder and all they'll do is protect the back four? And it's very the quiet, unassuming, dirty work, but he's involved in the game so much as well. So obviously he gets his goal, but there was quite a few times in that first half he's stepping out and he's leading the attack. I mean, he played a beautiful ball through for who was it, Gundogan early on in the first half as well. But you see him do that time and time again. His decision making on and off the ball is unreal, and he'll be a big factor in City maintaining this form between now and the end of the season.
Absolutely. I think to be honest, I think he's been their key performer sort of this season. Obviously, apart from Haaland, but with the goals he's scored. But I think Rodri is the first name on the team sheet. Jamie, not only Arteta, we just spoke about feeling the pressure. Pep Guardiola's press conferences this week have been very, very fiery. Obviously, the financial fair play that we spoke about last week, and all the breaches. He had a big dig at Gerrard midweek, which I thought was a little bit out of the blue at the time. It was something I was watching Sky Sports News, and I thought, why has he mentioned Gerrard there? It was a bit, I thought it was a dig, which he apologised for yesterday. But what's your thoughts on that? And he's coming out all guns blazing.
Yeah, I think it just screams of somebody who's got his back against the wall, doesn't it? Because I kind of feel sorry for him a little bit that he's kind of he can't win either way, because ultimately they're asking him loaded questions. They're trying to get him to trigger, will you leave if your club's found guilty of these breaches? So and then if he says no, they'll go, well, why would you not? I thought you're a manager of integrity and stuff. So they're always front loading these questions, and I think he bit, if you like. And let's be honest, I don't think he aimed a dig at Gerrard. I think what he tried to do was basically say, next you'll be blaming me for the fact that Gerrard slipped. And it's probably because he's Spanish, it comes out slightly different. The national press obviously run with it. Even I kind of took a second glance when he said, what? And then Steven Gerrard must have just put the paper down and went, well, thanks for that. I completely get that. But I wouldn't look too much into it. I think it's probably just more about he's trying to deflect from being questioned about the financial fair play questions, really. It's not like he's 20 points behind Arsenal and he's chasing. And you remember when Rafa came out with that big spreadsheet of stats against Alex Ferguson because he knew the title was slipping away from him. It's not like that. I think it's just more he's probably got his back up about the financial fair play questions. They're always asking him about this. He has no right or wrong answer. He really wants to believe in his own team. He wants to believe that they've done the right thing. And he just lashed out at the question. I don't necessarily have an issue with it. I'm glad to read that he actually made it. He kind of made amends with it and said that he contacted Gerrard to apologise. And I think that goes a long way to some extent, because a lot of managers could have said, "Well, fuck it, don't care," but Pep probably realizes that actually wasn't called for. I was probably acting out of just sheer anger because I can't just storm off from this guy and tell these guys to sod off. I've got to be there and I've got to answer the question. I'm sure Jared will get like a signed top for his kid out of it or something like that. Do you know what I mean? But it was very un-Pep like, shall we say, because Pep can have a moan, but he normally does it about journalism. But he's had a couple of digs this season about other teams. He called it Daniel Levy, I think, when the financial fair play riot sheet was read out. He talked about Karen Brady, talked about that. So he has got it in him to some extent, but I think he realizes that the Steven Gerrard one was pretty much uncalled for, and needed to apologise. So kudos to him that he did.
No, absolutely. I think you make a really good point about is the language as well, and I think that journalists sometimes can jump on things, can't, and that's what they're there for. Right? That's what they want. They want the headlines. But I'm going to come back to VAR again because this was the biggest mistake all weekend for me, because even bigger than the Lee Mason one. Colin, West Ham drew 1-1 with Chelsea. I thought, talking about the performance before we touch on VAR, I thought Chelsea for the first half an hour was the best I've seen them under Potter. I thought they were very, very good. Enzo Fernandez is going to be a top player for Chelsea. I've got no doubt about that. And I thought João Felix as well looked really sharp, and it was a really good finish. Again, the problem for Chelsea is they ended up dropping points. West Ham are struggling. But the big talking point is Souček's save. What a save. How has that not even gone to VAR? I can't believe it. It was speechless. I'm even more speechless than the first one.
That save was Connor Goldson-esque, wasn't it? It was a thing lifted right for Rangers. It's the argument will be that his arms are in a natural position if you are falling to the deck, but he wasn't falling to the deck. He flung himself to the floor. Absolute nonsense. I can't believe it wasn't even looked at. I really can't. Jamie hit the nail on the head. VAR works. It's the referees who make the decisions who get it wrong. I really can't get my head around it, and I do feel sorry for Graham Potter. My position hasn't changed. I don't see him seeing out the season at Chelsea. But yeah, you can see he is starting to have an impact and starting to make a bit of an improvement in that first half hour. Chelsea were unlucky not to be 3-0 up. Obviously they were offside, but marginally offside. Fernandez and João Felix are going to be excellent for Chelsea going forward. I don't know if it'll be under this manager, but for a different day, if they just timed a run a nanosecond earlier, then that Souček ball is just that's going to stop it being 4-0, isn't it? So I do feel for them. Hopefully he channels that half an hour into the coming weeks, and he does get a bit of run of form because he is a good coach. He is talented enough to manage this group of players, but again, it's just I don't know if he's a big enough personality to manage the modern day football diva.
Absolutely agree. I think you've hit nailed on the end of that Potter there. That's exactly how I feel. Jamie, what was your thoughts on Potter and Chelsea? As say some of their new signings again, Woodrick not really doing it so far. Again, he's going to need time, but bad result for Chelsea again though.
Yeah, and that was the thing. Not to mention it was a derby. Close rivals. You would expect them to kind of be up for that. I watched the game, and Chelsea for the first 80 minutes were by far the better team. Mudryk constantly looks as though he's trying to force the issue. Like he's always constantly like hit it for me, and I'll run onto it. And you can tell he wants to run with the ball every single time, but then it turns into overplay. João Felix looks as though he looks so natural with the ball at his feet. It's actually quite pleasing to watch. He's really good. And I think I said a couple of weeks ago, I think on this podcast, I think Arsenal would have benefited more about getting somebody like João Felix than they would have Mudryk, because of just the way he holds the ball. He's so much better at it. His goal took it really well. Probably could have had 2 or 3, but for some reason Chelsea have got this knack recently of letting teams get back into the game, and that's what West Ham did. They turned up the heat. They got a bit gritty, and they went toe to toe with them and got the goal. Some poor defending. In the second half, you actually felt like they weren't going to score. You can actually tell that they weren't going to score. There wasn't that, it wasn't like all backs to the wall for West Ham. They were sitting pretty comfortable towards it. However, that penalty incident, even in real time, you could tell it didn't look clean in terms of the way he went down and the ball was touched. You tell by the players' reactions. Commentary went, I could tell from here that was a penalty. And then you see the replays and you just think, this is going to get given. And you know what? It's a victim of how the refereeing has actually been done now, because the referee doesn't make a decision. But I firmly believe he doesn't make a decision because he wants VAR to get involved to say, I've done a wrong decision. He wants them to make a decision for him and call it back if it's deemed it. However, what he should be doing is blowing that up and forcing VAR to have a look at it. VAR, you obviously don't hear anything more on it until about 20 seconds later to see whether, and by then, obviously, everything's all fizzled out a bit. As Colin said, the ball came towards Souček. He dives to the floor with his knee. It passes his knee and hits his arm. That is not a natural position, if you like. That's not a deflection. That's probably the most stonewall penalty you could have given this season, and it just didn't go. And I think, unfortunately, it's going to be things like that probably gets Graham Potter in the shit that more than he wants. I think it's a shame because he's obviously a good coach. He's obviously a good manager. He gets the right results out of people. He wants to work with better quality. It's just whether or not he gets the time. And I think to some hand, to flip it round, he might actually get the time. I'm saying I don't think he will because I think it'll be results that go against him. But if he manages to stagnate it out, because what we're doing is we're basing this off what Abramovich would have done. Abramovich would have probably punted him in about 2 weeks' time. Abramovich punted managers for winning the Champions League. So we're judging Graham Potter on what Abramovich would have done. We don't know what Todd Bowley and co are like. The only thing we've got to base it on is that Todd Bowley and Tuchel didn't like each other. So therefore he went. So he might give Potter the time. But I think the fans are starting to turn now. You can hear it. There's a bit of disrest with the fans. And I think if the fans start making a noise, Todd Bowley's hands are tied. It'll turn into what Southampton are to some extent.
That's the fine, Jamie. It's no just the change in ownership. It's 20 odd years of the fans being used to that type of ownership where if you fart the wrong way, a better manager will come in. And that's the culture of a fan base. I mean, we all support big clubs in this pod tonight. That's deep rooted, and that's a very hard thing to change. And more often than not, the manager will change before the fans do.
Yeah,
absolutely. I think it is. You are right, Jamie. In terms of we're going off what Abramovich would have done, but as Colin says, fans get managers sacked, and I think once they turn, and as you said, but you both said, once they start turning, it's going to be game over.
I think the only golden goose that Potter's got out of this is you can guarantee he's got a big chunk of a contract if he gets punted, to get paid. He would have made money out of this that he would have never have made being at Brighton.
That's why he's looking $1 million at the minute, isn't it? I'll put our big paid money in the bank. Again, we'll give VAR a little break for just a couple of minutes. Jamie, I'll come to you first on this one because I've come to you first every time Liverpool got beat, so it's fair. They got a Merseyside win on Monday night, and to be honest, that's the best I've seen Liverpool sort of attacking wise. I think for a long time, I thought Salah was back to his best, and it was a really comfortable night in the end for Liverpool.
So I'm kind of indifferent. I don't want to get too over keen about it. It's 3 points on the board. It's local rivals. We need much needed. I still think there's a hell of a lot more to come from us. That I didn't think that performance was that great. I think Everton played into our performance a little bit. I think, our first goal was on the back of them hitting the post. We battered them for 30 minutes. Everton hadn't touched the ball in our box once. They get a corner and they hit the post, and you just think, uh-oh. We obviously get the breakaway. Jordan Pickford, absolute clown, but absolutely tremendous. Pickford at Anfield, he's obviously got this kind of kryptonite when it comes to Anfield, and he absolutely makes mess. So Salah obviously got the goal, which was brilliant to see. But that run from Darwin Núñez, he's not stopped running since he hit the Premier League. He really hasn't. His running stats are absolutely tremendous. He's just so eager all the time. But he actually got a pass away. I remember shouting. I was in the pub with my daughter watching it, and my daughter shouted, "He actually passed!" And obviously it resulted in a goal. More positively, people like Gakpo were actually in that attack as well. It wasn't just Salah, which we're used to seeing. It was Salah, Núñez, Gakpo. They were all charging forward, which was great to see. I still think Gomez had an absolute mare at times. There was sections where he misplaced a pass back to the keeper and let Sims in, and I think that was what resulted in actually their first corner. So there's still mistakes in there, but I think Trent had a better game. I think Robertson had a better game. Henderson was the catalyst of the difference for me. Henderson back in the team. I think Klopp said it after the game. He's a one-man pressing machine. Every time Everton had the ball in their back line or the goalkeeper, Henderson was charging at them. Regardless of the strikers, Henderson was charging at them. And you want to see that. That's the energy that we've been missing in the last few weeks. The Gakpo, I mean, he's worth 1,000,000% more than a little tapping at the back post. But to get his first goal and get him on the score, get him onto the stats, I'll take it any day of the week, and I'm sure he would as well. So he was welcoming of that. But I think a special shout out to man of the match, which was Stefan Bjatic. 19 years old, played his 7th consecutive league game. Out of those 7 games, he's been man of the match in 4 of them. He's been absolutely tremendous. Dare I say he's got a touch of Xabi Alonso about him, the way he turns with the ball. Doesn't pass it like Xabi Alonso, but he likes to hold it and control it, the way Xabi used to do it. I think the lad's got a big future. And I think, if I'm being honest, I think it helps with the market in the summer, because obviously another midfielder. Not to say he fixes the midfield. I just think he gives us another option that we can have in the midfield. We said it. I think somebody said it last week or the week before, where there just seems to be either really old or really young in the midfield. There's no blend, and I think Bjatic kind of helps out with that a little bit. He was brilliant on Monday.
He's probably been, in terms of youngsters I've seen, sort of like watching this season, he's been the one that's really stood out. I think there's been a lot of hype over summer, but he looked Liverpool, for me, Liverpool's best midfielder on Monday night. Colin, I think Jamie's done a really good Liverpool side of it. Summed it up really well. I'm going to touch on Everton a little bit with yourself. I think they weren't great. I thought they were really sloppy in possession. Maybe again, you've got to praise Liverpool for that. They did press them really well, and they went with Ellis Sims up front on his own, and everything just bounced off him. It's obviously a tough game for him to come in. I know that they keep saying if we get Calvin Lewis fit, we'll be all right, but he's always injured. Was you surprised to see Sims start? Obviously, he's someone that we see quite a lot of at Hearts last season. What was your thoughts on Sims and Everton's performance on Monday?
Yeah, I think just on Everton's start in general, we're still in the free hit stage. Like I said a couple of weeks ago, that Dyche's first 2 games, Arsenal and Liverpool, and he gets a bonus. So I don't think this really changes much going forward for Everton. And I probably was a bit surprised to see how shaky they were, and I don't know if that's maybe just maybe the previous regime in the last couple of years lingering over for the players, because it's not really something you typically see in a Dyche side, and it's a complete 180. You've seen them really fired up, and they would have ran through big walls for them against Arsenal, but obviously you need to take into account this is a derby. It just adds that edge to it, doesn't it? So I'd be expecting him not to look so anxious and look so wasteful with the ball going forward, because they are always going to be limited with the ball, but it was very nearly a typical Dyche performance where they're battered for half an hour, and as Jamie says, like, they nearly get one in, and that's how Everton are going to get the points this season. On Ellis Sims, he's young, I don't really know if he's quite out at this level. Yeah, I'll be honest. I don't really know if he will be. If I'm being, that might be a bit harsh. I thought Damari Gray would have been the better option for this. Just in general, I think he gives you a bit more of a presence up front. If Everton in general weren't so anxious, would they maybe have supported Ellis Sims a wee bit more? That's the counterpoint. But no, I was surprised to see him. And
Can I just say, we knew before the match that Calvert-Lewin was not going to be making it. There was talk that I think on the Sunday night that he wasn't going to play. We were fully expecting Neil Maupay to play. Neil Maupay, in my opinion, is not great at all. But do you know what he is? He's an absolute shithouse. And the way Liverpool's backline have been recently, I fully expected Neil Maupay to go in and cause an absolute havoc, get people yellow carded, pull them tight. When we've seen Ellis Sims, I mean, the lad's just been plucked up from the Championship. He's been having a great season with Sunderland. Not much, else you can say about it. But as Colin said, the ball was just bouncing off him. I felt really sorry for him because he should have been coming in off the bench, not starting that game. I was very, very surprised that Neil Maupay didn't, but I was relieved when he wasn't.
Yeah, I thought it was a really strange one. I agree. I think either option I think would have been better for Everton, Gray or Maupay. But I think you play your strike. I think it kind of says what Dyche is going to do the long term with Maupay going forward. That's for sure. Jamie, Man United won again this weekend. They're on a really good run. Again, I didn't think they were great at the weekend. I thought Leeds maybe edged it until the last sort of 20 minutes. But they're just grinding out them results under Ten Hag. And got to mention Rashford, because on form, he's the informed striker in Europe right now.
Yeah.
What's changed for him? I'm going to throw out this. I think that the signing of Casemiro has helped Rashford and that whole front line a lot, because I think he's give them the freedom to go and play and not worry about defending. But I think he's been a game changer for Man United. But what's your thoughts on them as a team and Rashford?
Yeah, I was out for dinner with the missus on Sunday, and we were sitting in a restaurant, and I could see a pub next to us, and it had the Man U game on, so I was kind of half watching it. And the one thing I would say is, you always felt Man U was still going to score. Even, Leeds were probably the more better team and the more dominant, but you always felt Man U were going to score, and it wasn't a surprise that it was Rashford. How he's done an absolute 360 of his career is unreal, because props to him. He's absolutely battering teams, and I think the key components are the fact that, one, he's not been asked to play the number 9 role. When he was playing the number 9 role, he was struggling with the number 9 role. He likes to come in off the left. So they stick him on the left last season, and then they buy Ronaldo. Ronaldo always wants the ball. He doesn't like to pass the ball. So Rashford then can't play his game. So I think go back 2 years ago, he was struggling with the off-field stuff and trying to deal with the play style. And I think the way Man United was set up the last 2 seasons hasn't really worked for Rashford. However, it just seems to have clicked. And I think that's probably back to the Ten Hag. Ten Hag just got out of the mold clicking. I'm not overly a big fan of Lissandro Martinez, but he seems to have clicked. The Weghorst, actually give Weghorst a shout. Like, he does all the shit stuff pretty decent. He doesn't get all the goals, but he goes up for the first ball and gets it laid off to the second. He comes deep, he collects it and plays them off and gets them spinning in behind. Whereas if you think of the number 9 last season, he was just bolting on and saying, just hop it over the top for me, and he was never getting there. It'll be interesting to see if Sancho can get back into this team properly, because Sancho, for talent, is arguably the best, arguably the most talented lad in that squad. The seasons he had at Dortmund and the talent he was shown was absolutely outstanding. It'd be interesting to see how he gets back to that. It's also good to see how Ten Hag's managed that situation. It's not very often you hear of managers saying, we're supporting a player from his mental health and we've sent him away for a couple of months to go work on him and then giving him a pathway to get back in. I think that's quite commendable because you would expect that kind of response or that kind of, shall we say, fatherhood from a British manager. This is a guy that's come from Holland and settled straight into the team. He just seems to get it. And I think the Man United fans are going to be, they're more than happy with having Ten Hag in place at the moment because they've obviously got a path and you can see how they're playing. And I think that goes back to your first question on Leeds. Leeds were the better team, but you always felt Man United were going to score. And I think that's just where they're at the moment. I thought a couple of weeks ago, I thought they were on a crazy run that they could probably make a challenge for the top two, but then they go and pull off a couple of silly draws, and you just think, you're better than that. You could have done better than that. So, top four is probably what they're going for right now.
Absolutely. I think the early doors for questioning Ten Hag was absolutely nuts.
Mm-hmm.
I get very frustrated with it anyway because supporting a Scottish team in England can be very frustrating, and it was Ten Hag can't handle the Premier League, this and that. But he's been in the door for 5 minutes after that Brentford defeat, which was obviously a heavy one. But he was taking on an absolute shit show created by Ole Gunnar Solskjaer. So fair play to him. I think he deserves a lot of credit. Colin, do you agree with Jamie in there? I think top four was always their main goal this season. I think absolutely. But can they actually challenge for this title? Because as Jamie said, they've had a couple of really silly draws. But Man United Spurs got beat at against Man City last week. Arsenal have drew the last two and are losing 2-1 now. So it's opened it wide open. What's your thoughts on that?
I think momentum's on Man United's side, and it's hard. It's a momentum where, as Jamie says, they just look like strong. You feel they're going to go and get something. Even in the best spells under Solskjaer, you were waiting for the slip up. Now you're waiting for the opposite, and that comes for a bit of unison between the coaches and the players, unison between the players themselves. I mean, how many times we had it with Pogba, we had it with Ronaldo, we had it with multiple players over the last few years where it's just somebody was taking the limelight. Now they're playing like a team, and the fans are now buying into that. I am looking at if the result stays the same, they're 5 points behind Arsenal. 14 games to play, 12 games to play. Sorry, I don't think it's out of the question that they could challenge for second place. I think it's always going to be if Arsenal do start to lose a bit of form, I think they might crumble. I don't quite think they have the backbone of Man City, so I think. So I think that's Man United where they're in, and again they look as if they've got that backbone. I feel really sorry for Leeds. That's been their best performance of the season, arguably, and they come away with a 2-0 defeat at home to Man U, and that just shows the level we're putting Man U back at.
No, absolutely.
I think the big thing for Man United is going to be when Rashford suddenly stops scoring. Do the others step up and actually fill that void? I'm really, really looking forward to the Barcelona game on Thursday. I know it's Europa League, but again, that management of his team, does he go all out? Does he not go all out? I think it'll be very interesting, and I think it could kind of path, if they're pushing for a top two and they're pushing for a Europa League, spot, or shall we say, a good run in the cup. How does he prioritize that team? Does he? Because he's obviously got challenges around it. Like I'm playing Luke Shaw at centre back, for example. He's not got the squad depth he wants. But I think with Rashford, if he stops scoring for a couple of weeks, where do them goals come from? Does Bruno step up and get them? Does Sancho chip in? Does Vigo start actually getting them? I think if they all start chipping in, I think Colin's absolutely right. They do challenge. See if they don't, and it's all on Rashford. It's inevitably going to dry up at some point. So it kind of might hinder their ability to.
It is going to happen at some point as well, by the way. We've seen it with Haaland. You can't keep scoring the amount of goals. The Rashford is going to hit a dry spell, and it's how Man United sort of cope with that. And I think you make a really good point there, Jamie, about Weghorst as well. His off-the-ball stats, I see it the other day, are absolutely incredible, by the way. And I think that suits the unselfishness suits. I think you see that with Casemiro, Martinez, as you said. they're people that do the dirty side of the game that Man United haven't done well for a long time. So I think that they're still in with it. I think we're going to see an inconsistent Arsenal and an inconsistent City. So you just never know. You put on a run, you just never know. Going into them last 4 or 5 games, it'll be an interesting one. But Colin, coming back to you, Bournemouth drew on Saturday night at the late kickoff against Newcastle. That's now 5 draws from the last 6 for Newcastle. Their top 4 chances are, I think, if you'd have said to me a few games ago, I said they were nailed on in the top 4, but now I'm not so sure. Goals have dried up. They're conceding from set pieces. I thought they were really poor. I thought Bournemouth should have won the game Saturday night. So, concentrating on Newcastle, would you, if you could sort of predict it now, would you say top 4, they're going to get top 4?
No, I don't think they are. And I think the biggest reason is Eddie Howe's listened to the pod a couple of weeks ago where we've said if they get in the Champions League, then he's probably going to go and get the sack, and Conte or somebody will get the job for Newcastle. No, I think this was the worry. I think we were saying they might be knocking on the door, but it's just how consistent can they be? And these are the games that they should be winning. They are no disrespect to Bournemouth, who played very, very well. I'm really surprised. They were actually quite fun to watch in that first half. But that's the games Newcastle should be winning, and that is 2 points dropped. It's not a point gained. And until they consistently just take the bins out, get rid of the rubbish around them, they won't be challenging that top 4. So I think we found a level top 6. That's the challenge next season. How do they have that killer instinct?
I absolutely agree. Jamie, let's bring you on that and Newcastle. And also just a little bit of Bournemouth, because I think, again, that was probably their best performance Saturday for a long, long time. But, it's not, I don't think O'Neill's won since he's actually officially got the job.
Yeah, that was it. I think he won every game up until he got announced as official, and then it's kind of stagnated from there. But again, Bournemouth were always going to put up a fight at some point. They were not going to get beat every single game up until the end of the season, and it was always going to be a gritty game at Bournemouth Stadium. Newcastle are notoriously not good travellers. You think about Newcastle and all the tremendous results, 90% of them have all been at St James's Park. Nobody wants to go to St James's Park at the moment because the fans are they're all in unison. The problem for Newcastle is going to be them on the road, whether they can still contribute and can get those goals. And I think at the weekend, I think that was a classic example of probably what's going to happen now for Newcastle. And I don't want that to be, because actually I've really enjoyed seeing Newcastle. But if you go back a couple of weeks and you've seen how much emotion and how much physical effort it took them to get to that cup final, that first cup final in so long, they must have burnt through so much in terms of emotion just to get there. It's inevitable that they're going to drop off a couple of games, and I think we're just seeing that now. That in conjunction with the fact that so they've got to the cup final. Now they've got to focus on winning it, trying to keep as many people as they can fit for that. They're trying to stay on the hunt for some sort of European football next season. And I think that you add in the third fact, which is teams are getting better now. The teams that weren't doing so well are going to inevitably start putting runs together, and they're going to start picking up points when potentially others aren't. Whether they can hold on to those spots, I don't think they'll finish in top 4. I thought at one point they would, but I think the moment they got to that cup final, I pretty much wrote them off from a top 2, top 3 finish, because I think it's just taken so much out of them. But the one thing I was glad to see is actually Bournemouth spent a bit of money this window. It's not bad for a team that are doing so absolutely poor. They still spent 50 million on 2 players, and I think one of the players scored. I think he scored their goal, didn't he? So it was good to see them finally start putting something together. They've been so reliant on Dominic Solanke, who I've always got a wee soft spot for, because he spent a good few years at Liverpool. He just never got the run of the mill. He was one of these players that got 6 games and probably scored 1 goal at the 6 games, and then you start bringing in Salah and Mane and stuff, and it was just never going to kind of kick back in for him. So I've always got a bit of a soft spot his championship stats are nearly as good as Mitrovic's last season. So he's got goals in him. It's just the Premier League's just a different class, isn't it? It's just a different step up. And I think Bournemouth are just victims of that. They've got a lot of players that are probably very good in the championship. But the moment you take that step up, it's just a whole different kettle of fish for them.
Absolutely. And, I just said it there, 50 million in January, Bournemouth. Like
on two players.
Honestly, it's absolutely bonkers. But just on like Newcastle, just to finish up myself on Newcastle, I think if you asked any Newcastle fan, would you rather get top four, get in the Champions League, or finish in the top 6 and win a trophy? I think they'd all pick top 6 and a trophy, because that's a football club that's been starved of trophies. And to be honest, if any support deserve it, I think their years under Mike Ashley. I think they do.
I listened to something a couple of weeks ago, and one of the I think it was the day after they got to the cup final, because it was like a midweek game, wasn't it? And I remember, I think it might have been Talk Sport, I think, and they kind of put this poll out about Newcastle fans: would you take a cup now, or would you take a cup full finish? Every single one of them phoned up. Every single one but one phoned up and said, I would take the cup. And the reason being is that you've seen the progress that they've done this season. That's not going away. They're going to be progressing for the next 3, 4, 5 years at least. They're going to get in. They want that cup over and done with. They want that cup. And I fully believe that. I think that's it. I don't bite your hand off it for now.
See, if you look at Spurs, on the other hand, like Spurs were always going to go in the trajectory to be a Champions League. They were always going in that trajectory to be the Champions League club. Newcastle will be playing the Champions League. There's no doubt about that. Mm-hmm. You need to win something along the way, or else it's not worth a fuck.
Yeah.
That's the thing with especially the Premier League. It's come away from that FA Cup and Carling Cup, or Carabao Cup as it's called now. That's not. It's the top 4 cup now, isn't it? That's what everyone. That's what everyone's sort of, and football's built on trophies. It's it's that for Newcastle fans, as I said, that's the one they watch. Colin, let's stay with Spurs. Then you just mentioned they got absolutely thumped at the weekend by Leicester. Leicester looked very, very good going forward, but then I'll sort of caveat that and say that Spurs at the back are an absolute bomb scare, and it could have been more than 4. I think they had 2 goals disallowed Leicester for tight VAR calls. Spurs also got beat last night against Milan, and I thought they were pretty poor. The big blow for them though is Bentancur. Looks like I think he's their best midfielder, if I'm honest. He's going to be out for the rest of the season. That's a huge blow for Spurs. How do you see them coping with it? And I think pressure is on them and Conte to get just at least top 4. And I think that might not happen either.
No, I think I said this a couple of weeks ago, or maybe last week, about is Conte looking to the summer. He's not. I never said I don't think he's interested. He's obviously interested, but I don't think he's fully bought into being at Spurs, and I don't know if that's maybe translating onto the pitch, because they are so up and down. We spoke about them, but it was a Man City. They played a couple of weeks ago, and we all raved about them, how brave they were off the ball when they worked to press, and then the absolute dog shit defending that they had at the weekend. They taking that away from Leicester, they were very, very good, but they could have been average and they still would have won the game. And it's not something that you tend to label with a Conte side, inconsistency. That's why I'm thinking, right, okay, is his heart fully in it? For better, for worse, it's always very, people stand where they're meant to be. Like, they're quite rigid. They'll follow the formation. So I don't know. I think we'll see them go in a bit of a slump, if I'm being honest, especially with that injury going out. On Leicester, though, I just wanted to get a shout out. I thought Iheanacho, he was unplayable at times. He was just involved in everything. He bullied the Spurs defence, got himself a goal, and I'm pretty sure a couple of assists as well. So he just on Leicester, I think we've all said, where's the goals got to continue to come from? Now that Jamie Vardy's slowing down, and then that's Mendy, Maddison, Barnes, Iheanacho all chip in, and as you say, Mason, it could have been many more.
Yeah, and I think it's important, as I say, Jamie, to bring that we probably do. We've got to concentrate more on Leicester than Spurs, because they've had a sort of tough run. They've had a lot of problems with injuries, but so have a lot of clubs this season, with the World Cup sort of stuck in the middle of the season. But Colin makes a good point there. There's goals coming from everywhere. I thought Iheanacho had a really good game. The one for me though, I'm always impressed with is Harvey Barnes. I think he's a really good player. What's your thoughts on him and Leicester?
Yeah, I think it was myself that said I fancy Leicester to be in the shavings for the bottom three because they just don't score goals. And since then, they've scored something like 11 goals in 3 games. It made me out to look like be an absolute plum. Even the fact with even the boy Tete even got a goal. I didn't even know he could score goals. But I actually watched Tottenham game. That was my choice of selection for the 3 o'clocks. I put Tottenham on. I watched the first 20 minutes. I seen Bentancur's goal, and I thought, well, that's safe. Turned it over, and it turned into an absolute riot for Leicester. And it's weird. It's got to be saying that Tottenham's defence is absolutely honking. Eric Dyer, for example, was probably at fault for about 3 of those goals at the weekend. His refusal to attack, to stick a foot in, to just even try and move it. What he was always what he was always focusing on was his position. He's got a striker, Iheanacho, running at him on his wrong foot. Iheanacho wants to hit it with his left foot. He's running at him on his right, and Eric Dyer stands and does that thing where he puts his arms behind his back as though he's going to shoot, and Iheanacho ghosts him, and you just think that's so poor. I kind of feel sorry for Fraser Forster, who I don't necessarily rate either, but poor guy can't get a break. He's getting a run out, and he's even last night he made an absolute wildy Dudek double saver, on the line, and they still go on and lose the game. But yeah, sadly, I think Leicester are going to be okay this season now. I think it's hard to come away from it. Got a wee soft spot for Harvey Barnes. I think he's brilliant. He's so dimensional in terms of what what you're going to get. He's always going to run at you. He's going to turn you from left to right, and he's got a shot on him as well. I really rate him. I think he's going to well. I'd be very surprised. I am surprised he's actually stayed at Leicester for so long though. So I don't know if he's maybe just a Leicester lads. I don't know if he just came through the ranks there, but he's definitely an asset that they've got that somebody would arguably take a punt on. I don't think he's a top 6 kind of lad, but I think when you're talking about teams that are looking for options, like a Villa, for example, somebody coming off the wing. If Leicester do remain with this money issue. Brendan Rodgers is the enigma. He's just a gift that I don't ever want. He kind of gets away with it, doesn't he? He gets himself in sticky situations. Doesn't really lose the support of the fans. The players kind of really respect him, and somehow he still pulls it out of the bag. He still kind of gets away with it. Brendan Rodgers' problem is that, in my opinion, no top 6 team will ever take another punt on him. So he's Leicester's probably is his limit at the moment, unless he was to go abroad, and I just don't see him going abroad. I think he's very British in his approach to the game, and his man management style as well. Surprisingly, the boy that they've got at the back, who scored their first goal, Mendy, scored his first ever goal the other day, and what an absolute belter it was. That was a proper FIFA goal, that was, wasn't it? Just run up and just smash it with a button, and it rifled in the top corner. Don't care what goalkeeper's in goal, that nobody's saving that. The pace on it. And then it just got worse for Tottenham on the back of that. And I've always, I think I said in the very first episode of this podcast, I've got this thing about Kane. Like, I really respect him and I really like him, but I think he's got a lot of flaws as well. When Tottenham don't play well, it's because, in my opinion, Kane comes so deep. He wants to touch the ball and spin off and run behind. But if Kulusevski and Son aren't making the runs in behind him, he's just dragged everybody back to the midfield, and then there's nobody up front to punt the ball to. And that happened a lot on Saturday. That happened a lot. He was because he's the captain, he wants to get involved in the game. They were struggling at the back. He's trying to come back to midfield to help out. It leaves them exposed that they've got nobody up front, and the Leicester defenders have got a field day. So I think their last game they won, I think Colin said, was the Man City game, which was funny because that was the last one Conte missed. Conte's been back for the last 2 games, and they've not done good for the last 2 games. So call from that as you will, but I don't see Conte being there at the end of the season.
No, I think we'll all full ass on that one. I think we'd all agree. And just to say, Mendy with his first goal, he's 31.
Wow.
And he's probably an absolute millionaire, and he's finally scored a goal. So there you go. But Colin, we've got two more games, so we'll just quickly touch on the final 2 of this week's Premier League game. Palace at home drew 1-1 with Brighton. Strange rivalry, this one. Apparently it's not officially a derby, but there's a lot of hate in it, and flat as a pancake when you can sort of compare it to any derby in Scotland, that's for sure. But we've got the VAR again. This time, Brighton scored the first goal in the first half that was ruled out for VAR, and it was ruled out for offside. The person that was doing the VAR, and I don't think his name's come out yet, you 2 boys might know, but he drew the wrong lines on the wrong player. So we've had Paul Mason not draw the lines. We've had VR not coming into the most blatant penalty you ever see, and then someone drawing it on who they got in these VAR rooms. Like, what is going on? That was the biggest one. I've said that all night. That was one of the biggest ones of the season so far.
I know, what a weekend for the referees, eh? It is a weird derby. Is it like the M6 derby or something? Because that's
Right, like that. Yeah.
There's a better atmosphere when I take my morning piss. Honestly, if that's what you're calling a derby, man, you may as well just chuck your game now, eh? But it's absolute just beggars belief. And again, another one of these, similar to the Arsenal one. You don't need the lines to be able to use your eyes. Like, he's visibly offside, and the amount of points of failure there. Look at the lines, then look at where the players are standing, then make your judgment. It was absolute nonsense on the game itself. But Brighton absolutely battered Palace from start to finish. It's up. The biggest robbery is that Brighton didn't score like 3-4 goals, and this is where people do need to be, now that Trossard's away, they need players to be more clinical, more ruthless. McAllister could have got 2 or 3. At least Solly Marks took his role well, but he's probably one who has to be chipping in with more as well. It's a robbery. Like, obviously, Brighton were they gifted Palace that goal with dropping the ball. Vieira even said at the end that Brighton played very, very well. It's a level of performance we expect to see for Brighton, but they just need to be clinical. So robbery in more than one way.
No, and I think he's a decent keeper. The Brighton goalkeeper is, I think he's had a really good season. But yeah, gifted. James Tompkins a goal for Palace, and it was important point for them because they've not been doing too well lately. But that'll be known for another mess up for VAR. Jamie, finishing off then this week's last fixture was Fulham beat Forest 2-0. Both me and you was really complimentary of Fulham last week at Stamford Bridge, and William was one that we both picked out, and he scored an absolute peach.
Goal of the weekend, in my opinion.
Yeah, it was a great finish on his weak foot, by the way, cut across it right into the top corner. I actually think they can get top 6, maybe not top 6, top 7, and maybe get that Conference League because it's gonna you've got Brentford up there, Brighton up there, so it's all to play for.
Yeah, I think Fulham's final position. It's kind of the same. You could make the same argument about Brighton, about Brentford. I don't think their final position comes down to them. I think it comes down to how well the other teams kick it back in gear. Like, if Liverpool and Chelsea and Tottenham, all these guys kind of turn into, step the game up. Unfortunately, these other teams just start to drift back down naturally. And I think it's inevitable at some point that actually might happen. I think the good thing is, we kind of said the other day, we were talking about how important Mitrovic is. Well, he is massively important, but actually now other people are chipping in with goals. Willian, I think he's scored 2 games in a row now, and he looks as though he's getting younger every game he plays. He's ridiculous. I really like him. The lad in midfield, Polina, looks to be doing an absolute shift. Fulham look like an absolutely solid little unit right now. I think the challenge will be for them is on the road. The same for Newcastle, same for Brentford. It's when they go away, can they get these points? Can they pick them up? And do they get them on a consistent basis? Games at Fulham, you traditionally think of on an evening, night time under the lights, Fulham fans close to the pitch, they're getting right on top and back of the fans, and getting right into the motion. When they're away from home, it's a totally different game for them, and that's where the big thing will come from. But the biggest asset they have is the manager, and we talked about that recently as well. He's got them ticking well. He looks comfortable in his possession. He doesn't look as though he's how can I say this? Fulham look as though they're overachieving, but Marco Silva doesn't look as though he's overachieving.
No.
If that makes sense, we all know Marco Silva's probably got more in him. He looks as though he's going to be a good manager going forward, but it's probably not going to be at Fulham for long. But Fulham are playing out the skin at the moment, so they're doing really well. So it'll be interesting to see how they get on. I kind of want Mitrovic to work. We said that obviously he'd had a few poor seasons in the Premier League, so it was about time that he kind of got the plaudits and got a good season under his belt. But again, does he stay at Fulham? Does he not stay at Fulham? Somebody somewhere is probably going to take a punt on him if he does start turning it on again. It's whether they keep hold of the stars that they have. I fully anticipate somebody to come knocking on the door. I would anticipate in the end of the season. And Fulham fans will probably hate me for saying this, but I think Andres Pereira is going to be turning heads. Willian's going to be turning heads. Mitrovic is turning heads, and Paulina's turning heads. Even the boy Tete, I think so. I think I read the other day they paid $3 million for that lad. He's played absolutely scan as well. These are all people. These are all players that realistically might move on. They might make a bit of buck out of, but for now, they look gelled. They look a unit, and I think the big difference between them and Brighton is Brighton. You don't know where the goals are coming from. Fulham, you know where the goals are coming from. Brentford, you know where the goals are coming from. You've got your Tony, Mbappe. I think the Brentford's going to be all about when Tony's discipline thing comes through for the betting. When they make a decision on that, because it's ultimately going to, in my opinion, it's ultimately going to end up in a ban, and it'll happen this season. It's just when they're probably going to do that. That'll be how Brentford react to that and what they do different. So I think they're all very, very similar teams. And just to clarify, it was John Brooks who was the VAR guy for Brighton. He was meant to be doing the Liverpool Everton game and was stripped about 3 hours before kickoff and kicked back out. And so, yeah, I was thankful for that. And it's the M23 derby, but nobody ever calls it a derby.
But yeah, there you go. That's what we need. Jamie Farr there on there, isn't it?
Just to clarify.
Once you're south of the M74, I don't give a fuck. It's all south to me, man.
It's a rivalry, not a derby.
Brilliant. But I think you make it again a really good point, Jamie, about Fulham, and yeah, I think Fulham and Brentford have got more goals in them than Brighton.
Yeah.
But it's that when Tony's ban comes in, that's going to really put into play and affect Brentford. But lads, that was the 10. As always, we'll finish off with the question this week, and unfortunately we couldn't have Graham to join us tonight. Maybe we'll get it at the start of next week.
We all know where we're going to win anyway.
Colin, it's the old debate, so I've thrown it in there in this series early on. You've got one shirt there, midfield in their prime. Who you taking, Scholes, Gerrard, or Lampard?
Right. I think long-term listeners will know my immediate answer, but I want to caveat it with a wee bit. I think you said one jersey left in midfield, and to be fair, I think it would really depend on what you're needing in that midfield. If you do need just somebody to sit and just tidy up the midfield and just keep the ball recycling, you're going to take Scholes. If you want somebody just to add goals and you've got the dynamic number 8 behind you, and you're sitting midfield, you're going to get Lampard. But see, if you want it all, you're going to take Stevie G, and yeah, he's probably the last the Roy of the Rovers take him out of Britain. Just that one man band, he can turn the game round himself. I absolutely fell in love with him watching Liverpool when I was younger. I never had any affiliation to Liverpool. Couldn't care for them, sorry Jamie, but Steven Gerrard, I'm buying into him massively. My very ever first podcast on Heart and Hand was me and Jamie doing
Steven Gerrard chat.
A Steven Gerrard chat. I absolutely love the guy. That's cemented even more now with 55. So, but taking that away, he could defend, he could attack, and he was the most rounded player out of the three of them. All three of them have different attributes. He's the most rounded, and I think he generally is the best midfielder to ever play in the Premier League.
Well, there you go. He's backed it up well there. Yeah, I won't give my answer just yet. Jamie, I think I know yours already. Are you backing Colin up?
Yeah, I love to try and stay controversial, but there's absolutely no way I'm going against the grain on this. Being a big Liverpool fan, yeah, I'm always going to say Gerrard, but I'm going to try and give it context. And I think, Lampard doesn't even come in the conversation for me, because I would say Lampard was as good as he was because of the team he was playing with. The individuals they had in that Chelsea team when he was playing at his best, he thrived off playing off people like Didier Drogba. He was the late runner into the box, sweeping in. You can always pretty much picture his goals as every time he scored, arriving late in the box, sweeping of the right foot, and it swept into the corner. He was brilliant at scoring goals, but I think that was an indication of how that team played. And I think he reaped his rewards from that. And, well done to him, absolutely, as you would say. Scholes is different. Scholes was a different era. Scholes was the 90s into the 2000s era. Scholes had a bit of different about him than what Lampard did. He wouldn't traditionally he didn't come in the box late. He was normally the boy carrying it into the box. His goal record for being a wee small ginger fucking fanny was probably outstanding, but there's something about him that he got well. I remember the 2 goals he scored at Hampden against Scotland. Like there was something about him that you just had to admire and applaud him for. I also give him props that he actually did. I don't know if you know this. He actually did all of his playing career without without an agent. He did all of his own contracts because he just loved the club. He did all of his own negotiating. Didn't take anybody in. Him and Sir Alex just sat down with a cup of tea, and he spoke about that. Kind of
He used to buy his own
admiration.
boots off JJB.
Yep.
Didn't he? Fucking.
Yep. It's something you have to admire about him. But Colin hit it nail on the head. But if you're looking for your last shirt, somebody that brings everything to the table, somebody that can do everything. I go back from his first game where he was a deep holding, right back, trying to maraude into a centre back position. Then he gets pushed into a midfield. Then he starts playing right behind the striker. Gerrard just did it all. And I think what stood Gerrard out is that he didn't have the Drogbas around him. He had good players. He had like Fernando Torres. He had Luis Suarez. He had the Xabi Alonso's. But that's all he had. When you go back to Lampard, you think of the team that they had around them. You had 11 world-class players. Liverpool probably had about 2 or 3 at any given time. And I think that was the difference for Gerrard. He had to do more. He had to stand out more. And he's an absolute legend. My favourite player of all time used to be Kenny Dalglish. For me, Gerrard overtook that by a country mile. I just wish he would have won more trophies doing it. But again, that goes back to the whole, if he would have moved on, for example. But he was an absolute Roy of the Rovers, probably the last of a dying breed, as you'd call it. You just don't build them like Gerrard anymore. I remember hearing, I've watched a few interviews with people that retired, and they talked about the time of even going into the England camp. And they've all said your Crouches, your Jimmy Bollards, they've all said that playing alongside Gerrard was different. that was the highlight of their international get together was training with Gerrard, because of how intense he was, even in training. Jimmy Bullard said it. I think it was best. He said he got onto the park and he was kind of just flicking a ball about. He says, and Gerrard fizzed the ball at him, and he didn't trap it, and he bounced off him, and he looked, and Gerrard just gave him these eyes, and he says, I shat myself. He says, I shat myself, because he says it wasn't because he was an arsehole or anything. He says, but it's just a different standard. It was just a completely different level with Gerrard, and he wanted that from everybody. So, yeah, Gerrard every single day of the week for me.
Yeah, no, I can't really argue with your points you make about Gerrard, but I'm definitely going to go against the grain. I'm going to go with Paul Scholes. He was, I think he was someone that I went live at Upton Park, and he still the best player I've ever seen live. That performance, very different to Scholes and Lampard. I'll give you that. And maybe the question is a little bit flawed, but I've never seen someone, and I still haven't seen anyone. Maybe Kevin De Bruyne actually comes into that, the way he passes a ball. And someone that scored goals, by the way. I don't think Scholes gets enough credit for the amount of goals he scored for Man United, and some of the big goals he scored.
He scored important goals, didn't he?
That was important games, and both times they won the Champions League. The goals, the semi-final. He didn't play in the final for both, but he was absolutely huge in getting there. It is close because Gerrard, I think, carried Liverpool. Jamie, as you said, better than me for a long time. But Paul Scholes, technically, I think he could have played in that famous Barcelona team. I personally don't think Gerrard and Lampard would have suited it. I think Scholes would have fitted in like a glove. So I'll go against the grain on that one, boys. But listeners, get your answers in the comments. If there's big Lampard fans, and we've not really spoke about him enough there, but it's definitely a very, very good debate. So just all that's left to do tonight is thank the two guests we had on. It was really enjoyable. So thank you, Colin. Appreciate it.
Cheers, Mason. Cheers, Jamie. Thanks for listening. It's always a pleasure.
And Jamie, hopefully, Liverpool are on a roll now. So, you've got your win. You're already looking to next week. But thanks for coming on.
Yep. Guess where we're away to? St. James's Park. Nobody wants to go to fucking St. James's Park, so fingers crossed. But hey, they might rest that because they've obviously got the cup final coming up the week after. I think the cup final's the same day as the Scottish Cup final, the 26th. So fingers crossed he puts all the kids out. Anyhow, if you're listening, as Colin said. But thanks again for having me on. I appreciate it.
Oh, brilliant. And just to finish that off, Arsenal have been beaten at home by Manchester City 3-1, which I'm sure we will talk about next week. And there is a good chance, I think, that Man City could be top of the league by our next show next week. I think that's very possible. But as always...
They're top now. They're top on goal difference.
Are they top now on goal difference?
Yeah, Arsenal have a game in hand, but Man City are top on goal difference.
So they'll definitely be top for next week. Brilliant. But as always, thanks for listening and take care.